Hi everyone, Arry here, Chair of the Cascadia Blockchain Council and also your host for Windshield Time and the Blockchain Underground on Meetup. Thank you so much for joining us. I know a lot of folks weren't able to make this AMA with Ali Medina. She's the Executive Director for the Blockchain Advocacy Coalition, and she dropped so much knowledge. I was writing furiously, taking up two pages of notes. We covered so much. So we covered California's policy world, especially around blockchain advocacy, her background and how she got into crypto and blockchain advocacy. She talked about the Bank Secrecy Act, the CCPA, the CPRA, the GDPR, verifiable credentials. She knows a lot about verifiable credentials and the trust framework. She talked about QR codes, how they had to be updated so that they could take on more information while also preserving privacy. We talked about why privacy is really, really important. We talked about how different jurisdictions around the world are embracing verifiable credentials in the trust framework, like Canada, the UK, and even New Zealand. And then we talked about what is strategies from the state level versus the federal level. I can't tell you how much I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you enjoy it too. And definitely reach out to Ali if you want to support her in the Blockchain Advocacy Coalition, or follow her, ask her questions. Definitely recommend it. And don't forget, we have an AMA every Friday, 12 to 1 p.m. PST. All you have to do is sign up at the meetup, Blockchain Underground, and we're there. And we're here to support you in any way you can along your blockchain and crypto journey. Thank you. And don't forget to rate, review, subscribe, and share. Bye. Happy Friday. Hey, Ali Medina, thanks so much for joining us for our AMA this week. Really great to see you.
Thanks so much for having me, Arry.
Well, actually, I've never really heard your background. So, if you wouldn't mind taking 5 minutes or so, can you give us the long form background and, like, how did you get into blockchain and crypto and what's it been like? And I know you do a lot of work on the blockchain advocacy side for California. So also, even how did you get into that?
For sure. So my background is not from the crypto or the tech space. I've been involved in Democratic Party politics for most of my career, even during college. My first job was field staff on the Emeryville for Congress campaign. So politics is an early passion of mine. And out of college, I worked for a political consulting firm, ran a lot of progressive campaigns. After that, got hired by the San Francisco Democratic Party. So I come from a very different political space than like a lot of people in the crypto world. I spent 4 years as executive director for San Francisco Dems, which is best described by somebody local as a knife fight in a phone booth. And then I went on to work in state policy for SEIU UHW, United Healthcare Workers West. So I was doing healthcare policy at a state level. And I really loved the policy I was working on. Simultaneously, I got elected to my local city council here in Emeryville, California. So it's a small city in the Bay Area between Oakland and Berkeley. We're known as the only IKEA in the Bay Area, if you want to situate yourself that way. We also are the home of Pixar, so but yeah, so I got elected to my city council. I was working for labor union. The hours working for labor union are very intense, and while I loved the work, I was burning out really hard, and I wanted a fresh challenge because I was running into I've done so many campaign cycles. There's like an election every year in California. I did a lot of campaign work. I was shifting into policy, but healthcare policy is obviously extremely complex. And while I loved the work I was doing and cared deeply about the impacts it had on members of our community, I was just really drawn to tech policy because at the time there were the Facebook hearings happening. And I was like, wow, Democrats are so bad at this. And I'm a Democrat and I'm an elected official. And I have a decent understanding of this. And I see why it's such a big problem that we're not able to create good tech policy. It has actual problematic results in society that our leaders don't understand this and don't engage with it in a robust fashion. We're very reactive towards new technology. So I was invited to a crypto dinner party because I do live in the Bay Area. Right after a bunch of people had just gotten back from Wyoming, and all the San Francisco people, I guess, flew to Wyoming, bought cowboy hats and spurs, and we're like, we're gonna pass bills. And they're like, you just meet the governor there, it's great. And they're like, we should do this in California. And I was like, slow down, it's a very different state legislator. We're like, we are the 5th largest economy in the world. Here's some things you guys should know about how California politics works. And at the end of that dinner party, they like pulled out a whiteboard. They're like, well, what would you do? And I was like, well, here's what I would do if I was going to build up a new movement from scratch. And like, cool, let's go.
Wow.
And that is how the Blockchain Advocacy Coalition started. At a dinner party in a loft in Soma, as of course it did.
Oh my God, that's so crazy. Can we go back to like Democrats are really bad at tech policy and like why? Is it compared to Republicans? Like Republicans are typically better at this? I mean, I think in relation to blockchain attention, I know the Republicans are generally favorable, but what else is going on? Do you know from behind the scenes?
I think the perception, at least among technology policy, is that because Republicans tend to favor less regulation when you have nascent or emerging technologies that seem as more favorable by the industry. Whereas Democrats are more concerned about consumer protections. And so those, if you apply old standards of like legacy financial services to new products like crypto, it doesn't always make the best fit. Now, to be fair, I think both sides of the aisle kind of suck at tech policy. I don't think Republicans really shone in hearings. I don't think Ted Cruz tweeting about Bitcoin means Ted Cruz knows anything about crypto. Also, it's bait. Don't fall for the bait. He's not your friend.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I don't think either party is like really actually great at tech policy. I think as a country, we fail to have like a deep understanding of the impacts of this. And we haven't really had a good conversation about like Section 230, which is what allowed all of our internet giants to grow, and like what actual reform of that might look like. Instead, we're just like, well, we should hold them responsible as publishers or not. And like those two ends of the spectrum are probably not the answer. So I don't think Republicans or Democrats have like a good.
What's Section 230?
Okay, Section 230 is what allows companies like Facebook and Twitter to not be held legally responsible for crazy stuff that people post on their platform.
Oh.
So if you're a newspaper editor and you publish something that's terrible, you can get sued for it. But this is what protects these internet giants, but also at the same time allowed them to grow in the first place. Because in the early days of the internet, I mean, it was just like anyone had a message board, and like, should they get sued for some random person posting on it? No, that doesn't really make sense.
Right.
So these things are nuanced and they do apply to economies of scale.
Right. So personally, maybe as a personal question, do you feel like your stance on that has changed, especially with recent events and all the crazy stuff that's happening, especially over the last like 3 to 5 years? Or, are we broaching, human privacy freedoms by touching Section 230?
I would say that my stance on technology policy has shifted from like, I don't really know much about it to I care deeply about it because I think it impacts our everyday lives. And I care a hell of a lot more about privacy than I ever did. And I think that's a deeply progressive value. I don't think libertarians should have the market on people can do whatever they want without the government doing it. I think it's progressive to say that companies shouldn't be able to track and hold my data and sell it in certain ways or abuse it. And I think that this is a message that progressive Democrats need to get and understand, is that it is progressive to protect consumers from companies holding their data. And I care about financial privacy. I don't think I had a solid understanding of after 9/11, how much we allowed the government to start tracking our financial transactions. And that I actually maybe do think that's not a great uniform policy. And we should relook at whether or not these things make us safer or just make us more monitored. I would say across the board, I am still like a far left-wing Democrat, but I do think that these are particular like issues where I think if you dive in, I don't think these are partisan issues.
Oh, well, I feel so uneducated now, like listening to you. So I have a lot of like, what happened after 9/11? Like, what do you mean we lost privacy and government tracks us more? I didn't know that was happening. What do you mean?
Yeah, the Bank Secrecy Act started requiring reporting. I don't know the exact numbers. I think for all transactions over $10,000, because they wanted to block terrorist financing through money laundering flowing through banks. Now, has that been entirely effective? No, I think HSBC just settled for like funneling money to Saudi Arabia. But these are now like any transaction over $10,000 that you do through a bank is like noted and reported to FinCEN. And that's like, I don't know, we haven't really had a national conversation about that. I don't know if most people are aware that that happens when you move money around. And I'm not sure that like most progressive Democrats actually want that.
I mean, Okay, so for maybe the ignorant layman, playing devil's advocate, so 10 transactions over $10,000. Come on, how many people actually have $10,000, let alone like can do transactions of $10,000? So it doesn't affect common people, it affects all the rich people, right? Or no?
I mean, it creates like a database of information that's held by the government, which has been hacked. Actually, there have been privacy breaches at FinCEN. It's like, yeah, and I don't think that most people in America actually tend to believe that even if they are at lower income, that at some point they will make a $10,000 transaction, right? That's a very American perspective.
Okay, yeah.
So you could potentially care about it one day, but also like, what if you're going to get a house or a car? These are things that do impact everyone. And these transactions are seen. Also, medical expenses often end up being like $10,000.
Unfortunately, with our healthcare system, yeah.
Sadly, it's sad but true. So I don't know if like where I end up on this issue, but I do think that financial privacy is worth taking a closer look at. And I think our, especially consumer purchasing has changed drastically, right? You can do Zelle, you can do Venmo, you can do PayPal, you can amortize out $100 pair of jeans over 4 payments through like whatever Klarna, I don't know. It appears all the time for me online nowadays. So there's a lot more financial intermediaries that are tracking and holding our financial information. And California passed the CCPA, California Consumer Privacy Act, and then through a statewide proposition created the CPRA, which is our Consumer Privacy Regulatory Agency, which hasn't really been created yet. California likes to pass a lot of ballot measures and then like everyone has to figure out what to do with them. That's how our cannabis industry got started. So we have like this new regulatory agency that says personal protected information needs to be, respected by companies. Consumers need to be able to request it. They have a right to delete. We're getting closer to the GDPR European standards. Right. So I think we need to think about how companies can do that. And one of the ways they can do that is through decentralization. Like blockchain, yes, crypto is the easy answer. Bitcoin exists. That's the thing everyone knows about. But the ability to de-identify and decentralize data and afford better consumer privacy is what personally gets me really excited about blockchain policy.
So like, I know that California has been working or thinking about this for quite some time since you're mentioning it. Where are you guys, California, on this front and compared to the rest of the US? Because I think this is very innovative. I don't think the rest of, oh no, is that me? Sorry.
No worries. Yeah, so our organization sponsored in 2019 AB 2004, which was the first verifiable credentials bill in the United States. And verifiable credentials are a way of using DIDs, decentralized identifiers, to attest information that has been sent from a verified issuer to a recipient using the blockchain. Now, to take a step back, because that sounds confusing, no personal information is put on the blockchain. And this is like a conversation I have to have all the time. Our example for it was COVID-19 healthcare test results. So there was a lot of concern in California that Google and Apple were going to do government contracts and silo all of our data, especially because both of those companies had privacy problems quite recently at that point. And also California has millions of healthcare record breaches annually. And it's not just like a California problem. There's millions and millions of healthcare records being breached every year in the United States. Siloing healthcare data is really, really bad. You and I both probably have our healthcare records somewhere on the dark web. Someone can buy them.
Right.
Enjoy that, everyone. So what that means is verifiable credentials would allow a doctor to issue a test result to a patient. They would use blockchain to attest that it was a verified person, like a doctor or nurse, issuing that test result, and the patient would receive it and have it in a wallet on their phone. And they could pull up a QR code that just shows their test result without showing any other personal identifying information. And the value of that over like a traditional app is that we're not centralizing the data. No third-party company is storing everyone's COVID-19 test results. And also when it's scanned, we're not giving location tracking. We're not creating a tracking system of where you're scanning your QR codes. Because there's no central database for it to read back to.
It's just telling you yes or no.
Yes or no. And you can choose what information you show. So that's like the real flip of verifiable credentials versus the way we generally share and store information now, is that it's held literally just by the recipient.
Well, how do we get there? I mean, just on healthcare data, I mean, everyone goes to driver's licenses and ID. So like, do we start there, or like how does a society, whether it's the city, state, or country, how do we get there?
Well, both of those things are happening at once, right? And so I'll kind of get to like, there's a lot of use cases and there's, I think, an overarching structure to help us get there.
Mhm.
So in terms of the healthcare records use case, I think Blue Medic is based in Washington, but they're
Yeah.
also over the Blockchain Advocacy Coalition here in California. And so they've been really helpful with us for developing these verifiable credential standards. Blue Medic is a subsidiary of Providence St. John, which is a large healthcare provider. So that means they have millions of healthcare records on the blockchain right now. They just are using blockchain to move around healthcare records, using verifiable credentials. And the patients don't know because you don't need to. You shouldn't see the technology. It should feel seamless to you. It should just provide better privacy on the back end. So that's a great use case. Digital driver's licenses, we're seeing a lot of laws pop up state by state. And a lot of these laws are probably being suggested by vendors that provide a certain kind of technology. And the law draft that we saw pop up in California, which we gently suggested to the author was not great, we saw this get introduced last year in California. I think it was introduced in like 4 or 5 other states simultaneously. I knew Pennsylvania had one. Said that the California should provide a mobile app for digital driver's licenses. To the casual reader, that sounds fine. That sounds easy. That sounds great. But if you know anything about digital privacy, you're like, a mobile app, that means they're going to centralize everyone's driver's license information and give it to some third-party vendor.
That's not helpful to solving this whole like hacking and centralization problem with data.
No, and it also allows for that location tracking. The vendor who's going to get it is probably a vendor who gets the support of police agencies. This is not a progressive thing to do.
Wow.
So those are the conversations we're having at the state level. Like, what you need to do to this bill language is say, California should have digital driver's licenses, and we should create the most privacy preserving standards for those. And if that's the framework from which you approach it, you open it up to technology that is in fact actually privacy preserving and inherently decentralized. And so that's why we're should be introducing in the upcoming year a trust framework for California. And a trust framework is a set of interoperable standards that the government will establish for private and public entities to build technology to. And this does a few things. It creates interoperable products that we can use across systems. It also prevents vendor lock-in. So we're not going to have institutional players having a massive leverage over smaller, more innovative companies. It allows the government to issue requests for proposals, RFPs, and have crypto companies or decentralized identity companies be able to compete for them because they're building to a known standard that is recognized by the government. And it'll also allow agencies to have more seamless integration across platforms. And that's something California really wants. They've allocated a budget towards linking ID across databases. Now, that's a federated identity model from like the 1990s that we don't think is the best anymore. We want to look to like what Canada's doing with decentralized identity. So what we're trying to do is take these ideas that the state government has, which are really good, which is to more easily allow people to access services from different government databases, but remove the back-end problem of universally linking IDs. Instead, use something like a verifiable credential.
Wow, amazing. I've been hogging the mic. Does anybody have questions that you want to jump in with? I know like probably Brigitta's got some, Mark maybe, I don't know.
Sure. Oh, Allie, this is great news that California is this aggressive and this, action oriented. Has any of this spilled over to healthcare for you and the healthcare policy sector? Are we getting closer to verified credentials and control over our own personal health data beyond COVID?
Yeah, I mean, the bill ultimately didn't get signed into law, but there was nothing preventing you from using COVID-19 test results, right? We just wanted to have them recognized by the government because we got hit with a $3 million price tag. It got through the Senate and Assembly unanimously, though, with bipartisan support. So what we did with that bill was really just build a basic understanding of the tech so we could do this higher bar. The trust framework will allow healthcare records, driver's licenses, everything to be built to an interoperable standard that's recognized. So yes, it will help with healthcare records, but it just doesn't have to specifically be siloed into use cases.
And what's the timeline with that?
We are looking to introduce this in January. We already have an author who we've been working with for an entire year who's introduced a bill about blockchain stuff, and we've submitted this language to be gutted and amended in. So we'll either be hitting hearings in January or March, depending on some very technical California regulatory stuff.
And how does that translate practically to the healthcare providers? Are they in need of, building new code and or onboarding new vendors? When would that happen?
I think what we're likely to do is put an implementation timeline in the bill of like 2023. But simultaneously, we'll be talking to that regulatory agency that's being created, the CPRA, to see like what requirements they're going to be coming out for healthcare. And so that's going to really impact what healthcare providers have to do.
Wow.
Excellent. Excellent work. So glad that you're working on this.
Yeah, we should have you help other states too roll this out. I know you're helping Washington State, but as we make progress, hopefully it passes here in Washington this next legislative session, the trust framework and verifiable credentials framework, getting this to go across the US and educating other policymakers and advocates. Tony writes, Estonia has turned to blockchain to protect healthcare data for their citizens, and there's a link. Have you heard of this, Ali?
I've heard of it. My understanding is that they're not necessarily using verifiable credentials, and that what they're using is fine for a country the size of Estonia, but maybe doesn't quite scale up to California. Mm-hmm. I'm fortunate in that I don't have to learn everything about the technology myself. I have Kalia Young as part of our organization, who's the chair of our Verifiable Credentials Policy Committee. And so I'm not an expert on what Estonia is doing, but I'm like, what's Estonia's tech like? And she's like, not applicable for California.
Interesting. Mark, you have a question?
Yeah, I was just curious about just the use case of onboarding and adoption for the users. And we're in our space, in our election space, we're looking at that, and I'm looking at it from a security standpoint, right? So we're looking at a lot of the states right now. If you're registering to vote or registering absentee, there are issues around how you verify who you are, right? So this sort of ties into kind of the stuff that we've been working on, and we're kind of this push for electronic ballot submission, if you will. And we do it for UOCAVA and all this other stuff. But the question is, how does the end user, how are you going to implement this for the end user? Because you have other use cases, like we deal with a lot of ADA individuals, a lot of disabled individuals, right? So we provide technology for disabled, and that's a lot of this has to do with absentee voting and all these other sort of issues. So the curiosity is it a biometric? How are you verifying these people? How are they going to identify, or how are they going to use this?
Hard no on biometrics. I find that to be a fascinating policy space, not one I'm touching. Yep. I just don't have the background to really get there. I do think biometrics and VCs will at some point probably be tied, but no. The individual will have a wallet of some kind on their phone, and just like a crypto wallet, you can use that, or an Apple wallet, your Google wallet, where you put your boarding passes. You can use that to store your verifiable credential for whatever it is, be it healthcare or be it your digital driver's license. From the user perspective, it's just like a QR code they can generate. In terms of full accessibility, what we've made sure, and we've talked with MIT, actually did a lot of work on making sure QR codes could store adequate amounts of information for verifiable credentials, because apparently QR codes were only showing limited amounts of information. These are things I've had to learn this year. They fixed it. Now you can put enough information on a QR code, so you can print them out, which is really important in California when we talk about accessibility and income inequality, to make sure that the privacy and preserving technology is not restricted to people with smartphones.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Mm-hmm. Have they published a paper at MIT, or have they published a
let me, I can try to find it and send it to you. They have created, it's an open source standard for how you can create a QR code with more info. And it was specifically for COVID credentials. And I think they piloted it with DVOC in India for COVID-19 test results. Are you familiar with that program?
No.
Okay, I'll find the paper.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
DFOC, is that spelled DEFOC?
EIVACC, I think. I will find it.
ACC. Very interesting. There's so much. I don't even know where to begin. Hey, Gerald, looks like you're still on mute. I thought you came off mute. You wanted to ask a question. Anybody else with questions? Hi, Alina. Hey, Scott. Hey, Tony, I didn't say hi.
We can make it a little more concrete. I can talk about a couple countries that are already doing this.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. Yeah, more examples.
Okay, so I'm always biting off of Canada. I hate to admit it. I'm a proud American. Canada's crushing us in terms of technology policy. And they're doing it in really smart ways. They're like hiring the best private sector people to like help create standards. So like John Jordan came out of the private sector to work for the Canadian government to create what's now known as the Pan-Canadian Trust Framework. And he did it in coordination with a lot of private sector workers like Tim Drummond from Evernem. And they created this really, and these guys have been instrumental in me being able to create AB 2004 and these standards because they've given me so much of their time and resources. So I really appreciate how generous they've been. And Arry, like as you and I collaborate, like I've done the same thing with Canada. I'm just taking all of their information. So Canada in 2018 identified that digital identity and digital payments were going to be inextricably linked and needed a privacy preserving way to handle that. So they created an agency essentially to look at like how to create these interoperable standards to move identities around. And then they created a pilot, which is OrgBook, and that runs on the sovereign blockchain. And businesses in Canada and British Columbia specifically, which CLIA's from British Columbia, so I've learned that there's differences there. Apparently it's a province. They now can get business licenses digitally sent to them as verifiable credentials. And they've been doing this for 3 years and it works great.
Does it show up as a QR code? What?
Yeah, you can get like a QR code or email or something, and that's just how they distribute it. They also have done like an ID standard where like 3 different kinds of government agencies use, I think, distributed ledger technology to not share information, but allow you to prove your identity across various agencies.
Oh.
So they're doing things in the way we really should be doing things. They've gone ahead and implemented these standards. The UK looked at the Pan-Canadian Trust Framework the same way I was looking at it in 2019 around COVID-19 and seeing this as a good idea. And the UK did a pilot where they allowed healthcare professionals to use verifiable credentials to prove their credentials across different hospitals so they could have more flexibility during the massive staffing shortages of COVID-19. So they can move from hospital to hospital more seamlessly and still prove that they had the right credentials to work. That was successful. So now the UK has released its own trust framework. They did their first one in March and they just updated it in August. And now New Zealand just passed a bill saying that they're going to create a trust framework. And I believe some Asian countries are banding together to create like a Pan-Asian trust framework as well.
Wow.
So it's happening. We're no longer bleeding edge, but we are cutting edge still. It would still be a very timely thing for our governments to be doing.
So it seems they have more federal support, right?
What?
It seems they have more federal central government support, whereas we are having to go about this from a state level, a local level almost, and then push it up.
You gotta love federalism.
Federal's not really, to be political, they're not capable of doing anything right now, unfortunately.
Scott asks, what agency entity will have oversight
over the trust framework? So my first thought was California Department of Technology. They have the stated desire to create like IDs across agencies. It seems to make sense for them. They also have the Office of Digital Innovation, which could be a good host for this kind of project. However, it's come to my attention. I've been doing a lot of research and talking to a lot of people in the verifiable credential space over the past year. Education is really ahead of the curve on here. Like there's national education organizations have been doing blockchain pilots for a couple of years, and I didn't know about any of this. They've been using verifiable credentials for teachers' credentials, for student records, because what they've realized is students don't own their own records, and that's about to be a problem with the new privacy laws. So ETS, which is like how most people in the United States get their like SAT, ACT scores, your high school transcript, those come from ETS, and they are doing verifiable credentials work right now. They've got people working on this that are interested in seeing it happen in California. I just talked to Flurry yesterday. They've got a pilot going with the San Diego Department of Education. So if CDT doesn't want to do it, I'm down to go talk to the Department of Education. That's my second thought. I'm not sure. We haven't chatted with them yet. So, if they see this, hi guys, I'll be there soon.
That's amazing. Huh, interesting. It's kind of like yeah, learning about how the policy world works and how to get things done has been totally eye-opening, especially over the last few years, and just finding the right agency to partner with or to lead with, getting the right sponsor for bills, and yeah, very, very interesting. More questions. Oh, Alina asked, what does ETS stand for?
I can Google it. It's just a private company.
Oh, it's a private company and they work in education.
Yeah, it's a really big one though. Let's see. ETS.org. Nope, nothing on their website tells me what they stand for. Let's click about.
I thought they were education testing services or something like that, because like, you know, the SATs and the ACTs came out of them.
They could be. It just literally doesn't say it on their website.
Somebody on their marketing team needs to update that.
There's like, we are just ETS. That's all we are.
Okay. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it came out of the like education testing services or system or something like that.
I'm sure it did.
Wow. So then maybe let's you have lots of experience on the California front, and
oh, someone's posted in IOHK. That's right. IOHK just joined our verifiable credentials policy committee.
Oh, really? Awesome. A good group of people.
Good group of people doing great identity work. This comment is talking about what they're doing with education records. Yeah, so they've got a live pilot going on in Ethiopia for high school records right now.
Wow. Yeah, Charles Hoskinson, he's the Ada Cardano head. The quote, for those that can't read it, says, the input-output IOHK team demonstrated the project's infrastructure will be capable of enabling administrators to create tamper-proof education records across 3,500 schools. That means 750,000 teachers interacting with the blockchain data of 5 million students on the back of Cardano ecosystem. Pretty kick-ass. That's awesome.
Totally.
So then I have a question. So you've learned a lot working with all these different policy groups, and, you know, stealing from Canada, which is really great, and working with lots of agencies and people in California. We're a little bit discombobulated in the United States. So looking at us nationally, you know, like, I mean, I'm new to the scene, so I've been here for a couple of years, and I'm looking at the Digital Chamber of Commerce and the Blockchain Association. We have these like federal groups, but they're not really leading the states. And then we have our states organizations, and, you know, we're all working we're working better, especially this year in the last 6 months.
To you.
But we don't really have a great game plan across the states and federally. If you were to put on your magic wand, you suddenly became president of the states and all the federal organizations for blockchain, how would you advise us to do something different? Because we can't do some more of the same stuff expecting different results next year.
If I could just control what's happening in every single state, but not the federal government.
Or you also could control the federal government. Like,
well, that would change it a lot, right? Because right now we're operating at the state level with a blocker at the federal government. I'm just trying to figure out how to move around it. So that's like 90% of my strategy is like, what can I do around the federalist layer? So as things exist right now, with us not being able to preempt the federal government from a state level, here's what I would do.
Okay.
I think we should create, if I could be the ultimate control freak, I already am. I would create a reciprocal money transmitter licensing system that is tailored for virtual currency businesses, that is accepted in all 50 states. So there would be a single portal of application. And if you are accepted, then you can operate as a virtual currency business in all 50 states without having to worry about the blue skies provisions for money transmitter licenses. I will explain why that is a problem and a necessity now, because I realize that I'm using technical language.
Yes,
so if you're a crypto company, digital asset company in the United States, you have to deal with FinCEN and then SEC, CFTC. And you have to like register and get a money services business license. But then in every state where you service consumers, you have to comply with their state requirements, because that's blue skies provisions. So that means that the states can do whatever they want for securities and money transmission laws on top of the federal laws. And so if we create a reciprocal licensing system that is accepted, if you apply in one state, it's accepted in all the other states, what we're doing is reducing the burden. I think right now you have to get 37 distinct licenses and scrolling that down to one, because the cost for a small business to operate in all 50 states is like in the millions of dollars and tons of legal time, tons of compliance work. So what we'd be doing is reducing the amount of money spent on lawyers and investing more money in building really cool, innovative products.
Oh man, I would love that. That would be really great. How do we
That
get
would be the biggest thing I think we could do.
I mean, we have the fast track money licensing system for like 13, 15 states, but how do we get the rest of the states on board? Is it just that states kind of, paying other states and be like, join the bandwagon?
Yeah, and like a lot of, I mean, listen, what are we going to do with New York? They've got the BIT license. We have to have them like sort of repeal it. Like California has not required a money transmission license, right? I've been working with this agency, which is now evolved for several years, and they've understood it's a nascent industry. They're now looking at rulemaking, but didn't want to a few years ago when this was all getting started, because they saw what happened with BIT license. And we have meetings with them like every 3 months about this issue. Wow. And it's like probably time for there to be some sort of formal registration system for the industry, right? If you're offering financial or financial adjacent services, great. We should have something formalized. But this patchwork just doesn't work for people. And like Louisiana in early 2020, like passed a law that says you need to have a virtual currency license. They haven't issued the license yet though. So there's things like this where just like whiplashes the industry, like, oh wait, we have to go get a license in Louisiana. Oh, they're just like not going to release the license. Now what do we do?
All right, great.
Emailing them and seeing like, I've emailed them like 4 times for my clients.
Nothing.
But
the excuse is probably pandemic, everything shut down for now.
Yeah. So yes, we should have reciprocal money transmission license. That would be my one shot.
Okay, so now you have God powers and you can affect the federal. What would you do? How do you help us?
I think the federal government needs to we got a question though. Logistics speaking, how do you apply and where? What businesses have you seen benefit from reciprocal money transmission licensing? Well, there isn't reciprocal money transmission licensing, so no one. And how would you apply and where? Probably you'd apply through a portal with your state's Department of Business Oversight equivalent, your Department of Finance, whomever, but it would just have the same application process in all 50 states. A good analog for this is NMLS, the National Mortgage Lending License. So, okay, God powers, I can affect the federal government. I think we should start with a close look at SEC Commissioner Pierce's safe harbor proposal. Yeah. I think it provides a good framework, a 3-year on-ramp for sufficient decentralization and whatnot, but I think we should layer in more consumer protections. I don't think it adequately addresses those concerns that you're going to get, that you're going to have a lot of digital asset offerings that are allowed that consumers don't really know what to do with. So I'm interested in doing something like that, but I think we're going to have to talk about notices. A lot of different crypto companies have put forward like these bold proposals lately, and they're like, consumer protections are important, but they don't really get into like what that means. And let's just take the really California approach to this. California passed AB 1320 last year, and it pissed off everyone in fintech, because if you have a money transmitter license, important note, it doesn't impact crypto businesses. If you have a money transmitter license in California, now you have to have certain consumer response times. And at first it was like 24 hours, but they amended that down because everyone freaked out. You have to actually respond to consumers if they have questions about what's going on with their transactions. I also think that there should be receipts. A lot of crypto products you like don't get a receipt, and new consumers don't understand how to use like eScan. So like disclosures on the front end, but on the back end, receipts, consumer response times, some sort of way of interacting with the basis. Now, eventually, I think we're going to have the insurance question. FDIC insurance does not exist for crypto, right? There's also no take backsies in crypto. Right. But at some point, there's going to be a conversation realistically about what insurance standards look like.
Right. I think it was maybe a month ago where the FDIC, the first mention of anything crypto related that I'd ever seen, but it was very generic, like we're looking at it.
Yeah, right. And it's like, well, that's not super useful.
No, but come on, it's 2021. You're just looking at it now, FDIC.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very interesting. More questions? We're in the last 15 minutes. I want to make sure I don't keep hogging the mic. This is really, really, really valuable. Thank you so much, Holly.
The FDIC probably doesn't want to touch it because they probably are looking at it as a huge liability right now because the crypto markets are so volatile.
I agree, but I think there's actually like opportunities with this new technology as well as drawbacks, right? There's like volatility, but there's also like technology to create like, I don't know, some sort of staked pool for insurance that we could do collectively. I could also see for the anti-money laundering standards, right? KYC is probably going to be required for DeFi at some point or another. And right now we do like this Bank Secrecy Act stuff where you file CTR reports for transactions of like 3,000 and 10,000. You file SARS reports, suspicious activity reports, after a suspicious activity occurs. Well, that's dumb. We have blockchain analytics. We can prevent suspicious activity. Like we can just like fundamentally rethink, how do we do enforcement? And instead of just this reactive legacy financial institution kind of stuff, say, all right, fine, if you're going to be doing over X amount of volume per year, you have to have on-chain analytics and prove that they're actively working to prevent money laundering.
Yeah. Smart technology. Yeah. Smart transactions.
Yeah.
So Ali, you said
Well,
earlier that Canada and others are ahead. Are they ahead in this fintech space as well around, changing the way in which we enforce anti-money laundering? Have they paved the way for us there as well?
I haven't seen much on that issue, actually. I think this is just a conversation I'm starting to have with my members, like around what does KYC AML look like for you? One of my members is CoinFlip, and they have thousands of ATMs across Bitcoin kiosks across the United States. And they have, I think, an incredibly robust KYC AML program. They use a lot of the different tools. And we had them sit down with the Department of Financial Protection and Innovation, and the commissioners were just like, okay, tell us how this works. And they were like, really, they learning about how these on-chain analytics tool works. And there's actually a level of interest there. So I think, I mean, as an industry, we're on defense right now for sure. We just got our asses handed to us with the infrastructure bill. What we need to not do is say things like, don't regulate us, or like, this shouldn't apply to us. But actually we need to deliver a framework that's realistic. And like, we can use some of these smarter tools like this to deliver that. I am not an insurance brain. I would love to see some people who understand the insurance industry look at what we can do with DeFi to provide an analog for the crypto industry.
Yeah, and Canada has way fewer banks than the US, so they have a different problem for sure.
I've heard they might be listing security tokens on the Canadian exchanges soon.
Wow, excellent.
Wow.
Which would be an end run around the SEC, because then Americans could just buy it on the OTC markets.
Womp, womp, womp. Interesting.
So we need something to hurry things up here, right?
We do, which is why I think like the states can really lead the way. If the states come out with frameworks that are realistic and not just like, no laws apply to crypto. If the states come out with something that works and actually are these little laboratories that we're supposed to be, especially like larger states or influential states, like Washington, California, we're big fintech states. We have a lot of these companies. We can say, hey, look at what's working for our states who have most of these consumers and businesses in the first place. And that kind of sets the standard. And I think we do need to message it in this way, because right now we've got a big problem in DC with like Republican versus Democrat talking points on crypto.
Right. Yeah. A lot of miseducation and misleading narratives leading the way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. More questions? I'm like, I have too many questions. I don't know which one to pick right now.
You want us to walk us through the next 2-3 years, Ellie? What we can look forward to? Do you think?
Yeah, I think the most exciting thing to happen this year is that Arry really took the lead on creating the currently unnamed, but we're working on it, multi-states blockchain party, where she's really pulled together with her people skills, all of us who are working on blockchain policy across the different states. I think there's like 18 states. A lot of people were on, what?
It's more like 32 now.
Really? Woo! Crushing it.
Yeah.
We have most of the states. Most of the states hopping on. to calls monthly to kind of chat about what's going on with blockchain policy in their state. And obviously it's very different, right? My needs are different than Tennessee's needs, but we can share talking points, we can share bill drafts. And I think like that organization is going to grow because it's a necessity, and having this place where we can share and collaborate is going to be one of the most impactful things we can do for blockchain policy in a state space. I also think that's going to help push the federal conversation if we were like activating the state house level. There's this concept in political organizing of building the bench, right? Our current members of Congress don't know much about crypto. But if we're supporting candidates or building awareness in state assemblies and senates, these people who naturally matriculate up into Congress will have a better understanding of these technologies. So one of my goals personally is to help other states host annual lobby days the way Arry and I do, so that they have like this ability to educate their state level representatives, who are the most likely people to become our congressional representatives.
Wow, pretty crazy. And we're looking at making it into a DAO, so dogfooding the technologies in the space as well, which will be really cool. How about some last parting thoughts? Like, you have the mic, Allie. For those that are listening and not actually with us right now in the live session, but also the live session as well. Like parting thoughts, like what can we individually do as crypto enthusiasts, investors, company leaders, entrepreneurs, new to crypto or crypto G's, it doesn't really matter. Like as a whole, what can we do better to help us and help this country and help our states?
I would say if you are a crypto advocate or business owner or investor, you should reach out to whoever's doing this organizing work in your state and see where you can plug in there. If you can financially support us, phenomenal. We always need more of that so we can do more advocacy work. But I also just need to know who's in the ecosystem and like who I can turn to if I have a particular weird question. Like right now, I now have a list of like 10 companies doing verifiable credentials in education, whereas earlier this year I had none. So I'm always trying to build up my ideas of like who I have to turn to ask questions and like bring in on efforts. And if I need an expert on insurance on blockchain, I don't know where to have one right now. Reach out to me if you know about that stuff. I would also say, like, be willing to put in the work, be willing to like make phone calls to your elected officials, but be willing to get trained by the advocates who do this on how to. Because if you tweet rude things at Democrats, they're not going to listen to you. And this is just something I need all CEOs in the industry to hear.
Be respectful. There's humans behind each of these seats, so let's build what is the word? Allies.
Even if you don't like them, it's just dumb strategy.
To put it out there, please be kind to our policymakers. Alina asked a question. Hey, Allie, what's your contact if we ever have further questions on blockchain in education? And Alina, you're in California, so Allie's definitely your person.
Amazing. I'm putting my email in the chat.
And
Ellie, are you located in California as well? Sorry, I joined 15 minutes late.
Yeah, I'm in Emeryville. Where are you?
Oh, okay, awesome. I'm in Pacifica.
Oh, close. Okay, and
just over the bridge.
Cardano's new head of identity is also in Pacifica.
Really, in Cardano and Pacifica of all places?
Tony Rose, he lives on a houseboat. Yeah.
oh wow.
Oh, I guess then we're neighbors because we look over the water. So
We can have like a little identity summit for education.
oh, I would love that because I'm pivoting for expansion. So definitely this blockchain would be very interesting to me because I'm trying to see if it makes sense to do something more global. So
Phenomenal. Yeah. Ping me via email. We'll set some time to chat.
Thank you so much.
Cool. And Allie, you're on Twitter too. What's your Twitter handle?
Oh, Evil Alley with 2 L's and an E because I'm an Emeryville elected official.
She's literally the mayor.
I was mayor. I'll be mayor again in like, I think 2 years. I'm up. We rotate. It's more like Parks and Rec than West Wing.
Awesome. And then what's the website for blockchain advocacy?
Blockadvocacy.org.
So if you know of any organizations or any groups that want to join the blockchain advocacy group in California and support policy making partnership, private-public partnerships, join Ally's group and support her financially or with manpower. I would say it's very, very worth the cause. And as a community, like the tech community, but especially the crypto and blockchain community, we're new to the scene. We have to hire, policy managers in our companies, investment managers, investor managers. We have to allocate some of our budget to this crypto lobbying and education and awareness, because it affects all of us. And so if we do have the manpower dollars, let's also think about doing that. Scott, do you know Ron Swanson? Yes. Good.
Yeah. No, we have a Ron Swanson. When I need power tools, I go to his place.
Literally.
Yeah, he helped me build my cat. I have a 12-foot cat tree that I made out of actual trees, and he obviously helped me construct it.
Wow. Amazing. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, Ally. Really appreciate it. Learned so much. I'm gonna have to do a lot more work and getting my privacy brain and verifiable credentials brain and learning a lot more.
You just need a Kalia. I just outsourced that.
Yeah, I mean, Kalia has been a really great resource. So maybe we'll have to create a subcommittee and have Kalia be the head of it here too as well. And
that's smart, actually.
Yeah, that's
okay.
We'll talk about an idea from you.
Well, thanks so much for having me. It was really fun to chat with you, Arry. And yeah, I will be awaiting the Slack news of your imminent delivery.
Thank you. Well, happy Friday, everybody. Thanks for joining the AMA today, and have a great weekend. And happy Thanksgiving week, everyone.
Yes. Happy Thanksgiving. See you.
Bye.
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 All right. Welcome to Windshield Time, y'all. Thanks for tuning in. This podcast is non-technical, fun, informative way to learn about money, Bitcoin, blockchains, crypto, and digital assets for busy parents and working folks who are curious about these new technologies. Day, Arry, and their guests talk about these evolutionary systems of money and what they do, y'all. Because what part of your life does money not touch? This podcast is not financial advice, and your reactions are your total and complete responsibility, y'all. Now, thanks again, and enjoy the show.
What are you doing?
Stuck inside.